Hi guys, so now we've set up our reference planes in Maya. I want to show you how to use these reference planes to start modeling. So this is a very simple object, but hopefully you should kind of get an idea for the workflow using these reference images. The benefit of using this method is you can create very complex organic objects such as faces or characters, bodies, etc. from a set of orthographic reference images. Okay, so we're going to use the box modeling technique as opposed to edge extrusion. So with box modeling, we start off with a primitive which is the closest to our object. So we're going to place a primitive. In my case, I'm going to place a polygon cylinder because my object's clearly most like a cylinder. So if we look at our planes, notice we only see it in the top plane. We don't see it in the front or the side plane. You might, depending on how you've set up your images. Now the reason for that is I've kind of moved my images in the wrong direction. Okay, so to fix that, I'm going to turn off the reference of the layer 1 so I can move my reference planes. I'm going to turn to Move Tool and I'm going to move this back in the opposite direction, and now you'll notice you can see that cylinder again. I'm going to do that with this one too. Basically, I just moved them in the wrong direction. So if you have that problem, if you can't see your objects, just kind of move your planes in the opposite direction, but don't forget to turn back on reference. In fact, it'd be good right now to rename this layer by double-clicking on it, rename it to ref. That's just the, I guess, standard thing to name a reference player. Cool. So now we've got our cylinder. I mean, the first thing clearly is to scale this up, and we want to kind of match up with our object as close as possible. But we want to be able to see through this object in our orthographic views so that we can kind of match it up better. So if we go in each view thing, we'll go shading and we'll go down to X-ray, and that turns on X-ray, right? And the same here, we'll turn it on in all of our orthographic views. X-ray, we don't need to do it in the perspective view though. Cool. So we'll notice that this particular cup is wider on this axis than the other axes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of stretch it out a bit and maybe move it over. I highly recommend you learn the shortcut keys for moving, rotating, and scaling. By learning these keys, you're going to make your life a lot easier. So W for moving, E for rotating, and R for scaling. Cool. So now I've kind of scaled it so that it more or less fits up with the top view. We can refine it further later. So now if we do the same for the side views, so we need to make it a bit taller clearly. Notice that I've got a bit of perspective because it's not possible to take a perfect orthographic photo because cameras by nature of optics have perspective inbuilt. We kind of need to ignore these curves, so the curve of the top of my cup and the curve of the bottom of my cup. So we've kind of got to ignore those and work the best we can with the images. It's good enough, basically. But it's important when you're taking the photos to minimize that as much as you possibly can, to minimize this curve of this reference image and the top curve as well. Cool. So now we've kind of got the cylinder to the rough shape of my mug. I actually know. So now it's easy. It's good to start adding in edge loops, right? So I'm going to go to my modeling toolkit here. If that doesn't show up, click this button here in the top right corner, and that will bring up your modeling toolkit. So I'm going to start cutting some edge loops to add more detail. So for example, I'm going to cut this an edge loop here so that I can start to bring my mug in, and I'm also going to cut one here, right, for the foot. Cool. So now I'm going to go into edge mode. I'm going to press Q. So remember we were talking about W, E, and R. Q just means is kind of select. So I'm going to double click on this edge loop so I can select that entire edge loop. I'm going to double click on this one so I can select that entire edge loop. And I'm going to scale these in like so. And I'm going to maybe move them up a little bit as well. Cool. Now I know on my mug the top view, actually it could be quite handy to have a bottom view as well in this case, because actually the top view looks quite different to the bottom. So I know that, for example, the bottom of my mug, although the top is squashed, the bottom of my mug is actually round, but you can't see that from the top view, again because of the unfortunate reality of cameras having perspective. So basically I'm going to select this one and this one, and I'm going to, in my top view, I'm going to make these round by scaling. So I'm going to scale this down a bit to make it, make those round. Cool. So now, if we look at this, we'll notice that the bottom of the mug is round. And the one other place that I know, again looking at the mug in front of me, in fact, if we go to my reference image, one of the reasons I've told you to take a perspective image as well as the 3 orthographic images, is you kind of get a better feeling of the object. Actually, this isn't the greatest photo, but also this rim around here is round. So I have the object in front of me, so I can kind of see it's just off round. So it's not quite round, but it's more or less round. So if I double click on that, I'm going to basically stretch this out till it's more or less just slightly off round. And you'll notice now that actually it matches up with this side better as well. So maybe scale that down so it kind of just fits in the side view here. So we're just kind of scaling it until it just kind of fits there. Great. So now you can see I'm starting to kind of capture this kind of wonky nature, this wonky, silly nature of this cup. Cool. So now we've kind of roughly hashed out its very basic shape. It's time to start, I guess, getting it a bit closer. So now if we look in the kind of perspective view, we see that this is a perfect oval, whereas if we look down here we can see that it's a bit flatter on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the soft selection mode. Soft selection is really handy for kind of making organic changes that flow. So the way I do turn on soft selection is I tap the B button, and if I hold down B and click and drag, it kind of creates this soft selection. It increases the radius of the soft selection. So if you have a play with this, you'll kind of get a feeling for it. So I've turned on soft selection. I've increased the radius. Now I'm gonna kind of push this side in a bit. Again, kind of trying to stay more or less lined up with the top view. I noticed that it's a bit flatter over here, so maybe I'll move this in a bit to kind of try and catch that nice kind of weird flatness. So notice that it's kind of pulling it out nice and smoothly. If I turn off soft selection and move it, it just moves that edge. See, it's just moving that. This is binary selection. I'll undo that change. If I turn on soft selection, it kind of does it nicely and smoothly and organically. And if I change the radius of that soft selection, it just kind of moves over a larger area. So I'll undo that again. But that's kind of the essence of soft selection. And again, you get to that tool by pressing B, and you change the radius by holding B and dragging the mouse left and right. Cool. So I've started to sort of capture the nice offness of this particular cup. I can kind of simulate what it's going to look like if I apply a mesh smoothing by pressing the number 3. And that's kind of crazy, right? It's got doesn't look anything like our cup. So I'll go back to 1. I'll hit the 1 key again, which turns off that smooth view. All right, so I'm going to go to face mode now. I'm going to extrude inwards. So that we, actually I'd better turn off soft selection, so I tap the B key. I'm going to select all of these faces. Then I'm going to extrude. Now to extrude you can click this button, but for those of you who like keyboard shortcuts, Control E is the shortcut for extrude. Cool, so I press Control E, so now I have an extrude. See, I don't want to do it like that. What I want to do now actually is I want to kind of bring this extrude in. So I'm going to change to the scale tool so that I can just extrude inwards a little bit. So what this has done is this has kind of created these extra faces that I can now use to go inwards. So I've extruded once, kind of scaled it in a bit to create the thickness of my cup. And notice it, like I'm just going to do this, look in the top view, I'm going to do this until it more or less matches the thickness in this reference plane. Cool, so I've done that. Now I'm going to do it again. I'm going to hit the extrude button again, or Control E, whatever you so choose. And now I'm going to actually extrude inwards. So we'll do it in the side view. It's probably just easier. Cool, so I'm going to go down to, I guess, where my cup starts tapering inwards, right? But notice, like, the walls stay roughly the same thickness. And so what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to scale this up a bit. I'm going to need to kind of grow it a little bit too, so that the walls kind of are increasing a bit on the inside as well. Because if I look at my cup, it doesn't just extrude straight in, it kind of follows the outside of the cup a bit. Great, so I've done that. I've expanded it like just a little bit so that the thickness of the walls are fairly even. I'm going to do that one more time. Control E. I'm going to extrude inwards, except this time I've really got to notice I'm cutting through the cup here, so I'm really going to have to scale this inwards quite a lot. Oops, that's not the scale tool, that was the move tool. Cool. Cool. So now I've kind of made the inside of my cup. I might just select this edge loop by double clicking on one of the edges, and I might just scale that in ever so slightly again. Because I was cutting through a bit at the back here. I was a bit close. So. Cool. Cool. Oh, actually, I should be looking in this view here, so I can kind of pull it out a bit there. Cool. So now I've got, I guess, the essence of my cup. This isn't definitely enough detail for Project 1A. sorry, project 2A, this is kind of like the detail we would expect. In fact, you wouldn't have even had to, like, I guess, get this. You know, it would have been enough to just kind of make the cylinder, squash it roughly into shape, and put it into your scene. That would have been fine. However, you know, this hasn't been that much work, so it's okay. If we wanted to go further, I would say it would be good to start cutting more edge loops. So if I press the 3 button again, we're going to see that this just doesn't look anything like it when it's smoothed. And the reason for that is we have some sharp edges, right? So for example, if we look at the foot here, it kind of comes in and there's this sharp edge, right? So I'll turn it back to smooth view. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a new edge loop. So I'll click on the multi-cut tool, hold down the control button. Actually, I'll zoom in more. In fact, I might do it in the front view, so that we can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut another edge loop that's quite close. In fact, I'm going to do 2. 1, 2. Notice the reason I'm doing one down here is, notice the way it kind of expands out here, a bit here. So I'll go back to edge mode. I might actually move this whole, no, I'd better undo that. I just cut a new vertex. Okay, so I'm going to go to move mode, so hit W and hit W and then move this down a little. But I'm also going to move this very bottom one down a little, this very bottom edge loop down some more. Just so that we have a bigger foot. Notice that I need to actually also select this last vertex in the middle, and I need to move that down too. We'll probably later on I would add more detail to the bottom of the foot as well. Okay, so now I'll select this edge loop here, and I'm going to scale it in, probably the top view, just so that I'm doing in both the X and the Y, to try and kind of get that nice foot detail that is in the cup. So it just kind of comes straight in from here, and then it goes out a bit. Now if I hit 3, you'll notice that this is a lot sharper, and that's because we've got some edge loops close together. If you don't have close together edge loops, you're not going to have a very sharp edge. And if I want this even sharper, so if we look at that smooth, if I want this even sharper, what I can do is I can use the bevel tool actually. So if I double click on that and click on the bevel tool, and I'll turn this fraction all the way down so that it's really close together like so. I can also change the sharpness by changing the amount of segments. So the more segments, the sharper that's going to be. But I don't want to add too much detail, because the more detail you have, the harder it is later down the track. Cool. So now I've kind of got that nice sharp corner. I might add one to the bottom so that the bottom's not all rounded like this. So again, going to the multi-cut tool, holding down control, or actually even what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to select mode, select this edge loop, and maybe I can even bevel it, but like really small. Now it's funny because you'd think that the bevel tool is going to make the corner rounder, right? Because that's what a bevel does, but actually it can be a really useful tool to make an edge sharper. So I'm going to make this like 0.05. So it's just a really small bevel. I'm going to make it 2 segments, right? So when we look at it, it's this really sort of tight bevel. If I hit enter, kind of click away from that, now you'll notice that actually that's a really sharp corner, because it's kind of added some detail for the smooth to conform to. And again, I guess the one one other place I would do that is to this last one. So I might do that again. 0.01. Oops. Oops. Well, what's going on? Zero 0.2, 0.1. I'll make that 0.01. And maybe make that 2 segments. Or actually, you'll notice that if I do that, it doesn't really make much of a difference. So I'll do 2 segments. Great. Now if I hit 3 again, you'll notice actually that this is kind of like a nice sharp square shape now. And again, I would probably do that to more of the areas where my cup is quite sharp. So for example, I would either bevel this or cut another edge loop just above it to make this a sharper line, except it's also kind of softish, so I'd probably actually do a bevel. So bevel, again, turn this all like down quite a lot. So it's maybe 0.05. We'll see what that looks like. Yeah, that's a nice curve actually. Kind of mirrors the softness of the curve of my cup, except 0.05, and I'm probably going to want another segment just to round it out a bit, so it's a nice round curve. Cool. So you can now see, again, if we go to smooth mode, now also that line is a bit sharper. Instead of being this sort of ridiculous soft edge. So you can see how adding more edge loops sharpens the smoothed result. Cool. I'm going to call it here. Again, I've gone further than necessary for Project 1A, but the purpose has been to, I guess, give you the idea, get you a bit used to some basic box modeling techniques using reference planes as image. So if we look at these 3 views, you can kind of see that we more or less match up with the views, and if you look at the perspective view, I've kind of got the rough shape of my cup. Cool. So that's enough for today.